Hi, I am very tired. Also, tell me why I'm realizing I think I'm learning some people got too much time on their time on their hands. I work a full-time job, y'all. I am not at home on the internet and have this time to just argue back and forth with people. And by the time I get home from work, guess what? We are tired. Anyways, I've been getting a lot of a lot of comments on, I would say specifically, there's a video that has like 380 views and like 76 comments. And it's mostly I mean, I guess in the defense, I did pose a question. I wasn't expecting people to to actually respond to it. This was my why I like apologetics. And the main thing I'm going to say is I personally feel like, I guess me saying I don't put all my faith in science, I don't know, maybe that offends people who believe science is, you have to trust the science and you have to, is what they tell you. But one of the best things that I learned in school was to question everything. If you never question what you believe, you never question what you think, you never challenge your own beliefs or mindset, you really are limiting yourself. Um, and someone made a comment kind of along those lines that they felt like religious people limit their mindset. I feel like there's such thing as being so open-minded, you fall for anything, right? You have to test what you believe in a logically rational way. It's just like you can't, like, I'm not claiming to just believe anything. I understand that there are people who don't believe in God, right? That's not what I'm, I guess, arguing against. Like, people can choose to believe whatever they want to believe at the end of the day. People can believe in unicorns. People can believe in aliens. People can believe whatever they want to believe. Like, a belief is something that you choose. Like, you can either choose to agree with something, but no one actually can stop someone from believing in something, even if they believe in something that's untrue. So I think that's where I get a lot of my thought process from, because there's an assumption that, I would say this is the basis for, I think, a lot of my, I believe in God objectively, meaning it's not my subjective ideas of who God is. If you read the Bible, which I've actually fully read the Bible, well, I'm almost finished reading the Bible. I've read most of the Bible. And my plan is to read the Bible like every year, just over and over again, because you truly can learn something different from the Bible every time you read it. You can reread the same verse 10 different times and understand something different each time. Like, it's that, in my opinion, profound. But I think you only understand that when you actually believe the Bible. I've said this in another video. I know, like, people who are non-religious who claim to have read the Bible and claim they understood it and still don't believe it. And I said, I don't know. I feel like to truly understand the Bible, you do have to, requires a certain level of faith in it. Because if you don't believe anything the Bible is claiming to be is true, you're not really understanding the actual message of the Bible, and you can't understand what you're reading if you don't get the message that's being portrayed. Because the Bible is not claiming things subjectively, it's claiming things objectively. It starts in Genesis with the claim of who God is. In the beginning, God is literally the first three words in the Bible. And some people don't understand how profound that is, but I found, even when I first started reading the Bible, just reading that Bible, those first three words in the Bible gave me like this piece that I just can't understand. Like, you can't explain it, because I feel like I try to understand, the scientific explanation, the Big Bang Theory and all of that. But to me, it is more rational to believe a eternal being outside of our world exists and was intellectually able to create the universe and everything in it. I don't I'm tired of going back and forth with people on comments on things. Like, I'm not here to argue with people at the end of the day. I'm not a professional debater. Some people, I feel like, commented on my last video expecting me to like debate them. And the thing is, I share my thoughts, I share my opinions. If you agree, great. If you don't agree, it's fine. Like, I don't live my life with I think this is where it comes down to what you believe, whatever you put your faith in, whatever you base your beliefs off of. You hopefully are putting your faith in something you actually believe to be true. Not that you just hope is true, not that you just think is true. You know, you want to believe, like, I hope people care about objective truth at the end of the day. So, in my opinion, it's either God actually exists or God doesn't. Objectively, like, both can't be true. You can't have two contradictory things can't be true at once. And I feel like the problem that I have with the subjectiveness of a lot of like cultural norms is, you have people claiming contradictory things as both being equally rational. And personally, for me, I can't live my life where every claim is equally true, because that's just not possible. There's only one truth at the end of the day. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If other people are right, they're right. But at the end of the day, you put your faith into I would hope people put their faith into things that they believe are objectively true. And what I've come to realize, at least from observations, listening to certain things people have said, it really just comes across that I think, like, when you argue with another religious person, there's like a common basis, I guess, at least. Like, there's an understanding of God at least existing, right? But when you're arguing with someone who's just not religious at all, there you're really not arguing with a I personally do think it is a worldview to not believe in God, but it's a worldview that is like the negative. I feel like I can never figure out how to say what I'm trying to say or how to explain it so that people understand it. I like to make things very simple when I say them. Like, I'm not trying to make myself seem more or less intelligent or use a bunch of large words so people think I'm smarter or whatever. I'm just sharing what I think. If you don't agree, that's fine. It's not the end of the world. I'm not claiming to be the most intelligent person on the planet. Whether I am or not, honestly, does not actually matter, but I digress. Anyways, the thing about it is the worldview, and this is why I guess I made the video that I said that science, in my opinion, this is my opinion, ultimately becomes the religion of the non-religious, because they look at science as being this somewhat objective truth. Well, we can test this with facts and evidence and experience, supposedly, right? That's why they claim you should trust the science, because science is quote unquote testable and observable. But when I point out the fact that scientific theories are in fact not testable, observable, or measurable, yet people still believe those things as if they are facts, people don't like when I point those things out, because to them, all of science is just automatically, this is the best way we have to test and measure, the things in our world. I don't know. I don't know. I also just want to point out, I'm I think I did say this in my last video. When I specifically talk about science based things, like, there's the truth of the matter is we're taught a lot of things that are scientific theories as if they are facts. And I feel like the assumption that anything science theorizes about the world that we claim we can't automatically say is true, but we've tested it and the evidence supports this, supposedly. Evidence that I haven't, seen for myself, right? So it's like, at the end of the day, I'm still trusting what someone else says, but you're saying I should trust this person over trusting, or trust what scientists say over trusting what the Bible says or what a religion says or whatever. Now, personally, I think when it comes to like arguing for or against God, I feel like these are arguments that I don't really get into, because at the end of the day, I understand from just a very generalized perspective. Like I said, I cannot speak for every individual person that does not believe in God and tell you exactly why that specific person does or does not believe, or is not convinced, or whatever their reasoning is. But just the overall general consensus that I personally observed is a lack of a lack of faith, a lack of faith lack of faith, and I feel like doubt are similar but not exactly the same. Like, doubting something, you can doubt something, I feel like, but doubting doesn't mean the what you doubt isn't true, right? It just means you don't believe it. Like, disbelief is when something is true but you don't believe it, right? So it's like a disbelief of God almost inserts that God exists but you don't believe it, versus it's like you don't have an alternative, because there's not an alternative, I guess, belief system. It's just, I don't believe what you believe. So it's really just like a negative to a belief, essentially. I don't want to say it's an anti-belief, because it's just like, I don't know. But I always think of like, there's always like an opposition. Isn't that a law in like thermodynamics or whatever? I don't know. There's always like an opposing force to everything. Anyways, I think when you actually question the things that you've been told, and also I think just think about things like really think about them. There's a lot of things that we're told to accept as truth that honestly don't make a lot of sense when you really think about it. And that's what I was essentially saying. I definitely still feel Like, there is a certain level of faith you have to put to believe a scientific theory, such as the Big Bang, evolution, gravity, what have you. Like, scientific theories are theories and not facts. And then I read something that said, like, technically, not even scientific laws are 100% proven. So it's just like everything scientific, in my opinion, comes off just very subjective. And I feel like they have to claim it's subjective because science as a whole is kind of asserting we can trust our own assumptions about the world, essentially, as being rational, logical, and trustable. I don't know. Anyways, the main thing I guess I was saying is that whether or not someone believes in God is ultimately that individual person's choice, which is what I guess some people had a problem with. Um, Ultimately, I choose to believe in God. At the end of the day, it's like anyone can be met with evidence. You can look at the evidence, you can look at facts, you can look at whatever. I also feel like anytime I pose the question of what specific evidence would it take for you to believe in God, no one can ever tell me like what specific evidence would make them believe in God, because it's a very subjective thing to even say. It's just like, well, I want you to give me evidence that I feel is substantial enough to make me believe in God, but it's not something that it's never evidence that's actually objective. It's always like it has to be tailored to what that person is willing to believe or is willing to accept as their evidence. So at the end of the day, you're really just arguing, and this is why I don't argue back and forth type things with about stuff like that, because at the end of the day, you can't argue with someone who already believes they know all the answers to a certain extent, or it's just like you're already set in your disbelief at the end of the day. Like, I don't know what it would take for you to believe in God, but I'm sure God does. I'm sure you know, but I can't answer that question for you of what it would take for you to believe in God. I also definitely think, people, I think a lot of people claim like it's just a lack of evidence, but there's definitely a lot of other things outside of just evidence. I feel like the people's ideas of God, who God is also something I feel like you have to take into an account. There's just so much individual subjective things that it's just like at the end of the day, I feel like it really, in my opinion, comes down, if you don't want to believe in God, you won't believe in Him. Um, and that to me is the truth. The Bible tells literally says it even in the Bible. It's like you have to have a childlike faith. Children have this trust in the adults around them. And maybe this seems silly to someone who's an atheist because they don't understand. Like, there's so much wisdom in the Bible that I feel like you're not going to understand if you're not a Christian, if you don't believe in God. But there's also so much just universal truth in the Bible. There's so much wisdom in the Bible when you understand it. But anyways, children have this just kind of unrelentless trust in the adults around them. What children believe, what they learn, what they understand is based off of what they are taught to believe, what they're taught to understand. And so the Bible literally says you have to become like a child, in the sense of, you either trust what the Bible says or you don't. But your faith, like childlike faith, is the faith where You believe it because you trust the source that is stating it. And I feel like as an adult, maybe you do become more skeptical and more questioning and all of those things. But truly, faith in God does not require anything but the willingness to believe. And that's a hill I'm willing to stand on. I think if you're not willing to believe in God, you should ask yourself, why don't you want to believe in God? I think that's something people ignore because there's often a bias against God that already existed, especially when you take into account people who claim to have religious trauma because of their bad experiences growing up in church and other things. Like, I've probably seen most of the atheists that I've observed have been ones that were um, ex religious, who left their previous religion, typically Christian, because I don't know why I come across a lot more of those. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you're aware that there's a bias against your previous religion that also is fueling your disbelief in God, you can't sit here and claim it's just like, well, there's just not enough evidence, because that's a very subjective personal reason that at the end of the day fuels your disbelief, your doubt, whatever, why you're not convinced, or why you are convinced God does not exist, because that also is a belief. I would say that goes beyond atheists, because it seems like there's not even a consensus on what an atheist actually is. Also, it's just like, well, I'm not convinced of God, but there's also people who say, well, I'm convinced God doesn't exist at all, and XYZ, whatever. I can't get into all the arguments with people. At the end of the day, I have a life. I do have a life outside of my YouTube channel, and at the end of the day, I share my opinions because, I don't know, it's a free country. Because it's a free country. Whether or not people agree with me is not necessarily what makes me want to post my content. I just share the way I think about things. At the end of the day, either I'm right or I'm wrong. I'm willing to bet my life, though. And it's just like, you have to put your faith in something. Everyone's putting their faith in something. I don't care what anyone says. You can say, like, you don't have faith in anything, but trust me when I say you are putting your faith in something. Just because your faith is not in a God existing doesn't mean you don't have faith in something. Because at the end of the day, it's like everyone has to put their faith in something that they cannot see or know for sure. Does every atheist actually know what actually happens when they die? No. So what do they put their faith in? They're putting their faith in their disbelief in a God existing, right? That's still a, like, non-belief. This is why I said I feel like I have a problem saying a disbelief is not a belief. It's like it's a strong doubt, but you're trusting your doubt. At the end of the day, you're putting faith that your doubt, that your skepticalism about God is correct. And you're typically saying, because there's not proof that I'm aware of or that I believe of God, therefore you can't claim to believe in God, essentially because there is not evidence that you feel is um good enough to believe in God. Which, again, you can't argue with people who don't want to believe something. You can't argue with people's bias, with people's trauma, with people's what have you. Whatever that person's individual reasons are for, I would say, and I feel like this is where I feel like sometimes people aren't really honest with themselves, Because at the end of the day, it's like you don't want to believe in God. And if you admitted that bias, I feel like you could have a more honest conversation with people, because it comes off as obvious to me when you're listening, but it's just like sometimes I don't understand, because it seems like even though people are aware evidence of God can't be scientific, they still are expecting people to give them scientific evidence of God, which I've already explained like why that doesn't make sense. If science doesn't have the ability to prove or disprove God, why still claim you need some sort of scientific empirical evidence of God's existence in order to believe it? It's like you're still trying to use, you know, a scientific understanding, I guess, of the world to say whether or not you can really prove or disprove God. And like I said, I guess belief in God is more of a philosophical thing versus just scientific, but I definitely think people don't understand the bias within scientific, like the scientific realm, which is the assumption of no God. Now, I'm not saying this as if there aren't Christians who are scientists. There's Christian doctors, Christian, chemists, Christians. Like, there's Christians in all different fields of the scientific realm. So I'm not saying this as though these two worlds are pitted against each other. Like, you can be a Christian scientist at the end of the day, but I'm saying when it comes to the what science, I guess, claims about the world versus what the Bible claims about the world, the scientific claims that are, I guess, reported are, the theories that essentially I feel like people don't understand like what I mean by the atheist perspective, because the atheist perspective is in a lot of ways assumed to be the truth or the natural or the zero. Like that's the assumption essentially you're making, like, oh, to be unbiased is to be an atheist, but to be an atheist is already a bias. I think that's where maybe it gets misunderstood, because atheists don't see their beliefs as being a bias, but it is, because it's an assumption. Um Anyways, I think that's all I have for now. Trying to think if there was anything else that I wanted to address. Basically, the reason my videos also are not these super drawn out dramatic, like, I'm not an apologist page. This is literally my personal YouTube page. Majority of the videos that I post on here are not, me arguing with atheists. Like, this is just, I just sometimes share my personal thoughts on things, and whether or not people watch the video or not is up to them. But I am not trying to convince someone of anything. Like, and I feel like this is what I honestly feel like. At the end of the day, you can't convince someone of something they don't want to believe in. No amount of evidence of arguing can convince someone to believe something they don't want to believe. You can't argue with someone who doesn't want to believe something. Like the skeptic, like someone who is a skeptic cannot be reasoned with or rationalized with rationalized with, because at the end of the day, they, like, to be a skeptic is just to never believe anything anyone else says. You just question everything, or I have doubt, well, I don't know if that's true, I'm skeptical of this, whatever. But like I said, what you believe about the world, I would hope whatever you choose to believe, whatever you're putting your faith in, is something that you can trust. I also think too, you know I can't argue from a worldview. I mean, everyone's biased at the end of the day. I can only argue what I believe to be true, right? I can't argue what someone else believes to be true. So maybe I feel like making sure I'm stating, I mean, I guess I always state that this is my opinion. Like I can't actually speak for other people. I can only speak for myself, and that's the only thing I claim to speak for. My thoughts, my opinions are my own. No one else's at the end of the day. So, um who's right, who's wrong, whatever, when it comes down to at the end of the day, we're not going to know until we die. Honestly, I feel like that's slightly true. I definitely think you can, I don't know. I feel like if you never think about what happens after you die, if you wait till the end of your life to figure out, what you believe, in a lot of ways you've wasted your life. Um but I've had thoughts about the world, the beginning of the world, literally since I was like 12, 13. I feel like even when I was learning about evolution in school, though, I was like skeptical of it. I don't know. Like I said, y'all don't question enough things that you're being told. Like, someone told you to believe in evolution. The same way, it's just like people take. This is why I honestly feel like, and I standing 10 toes down on this, there are, it takes faith. It definitely still takes faith to believe in science. You are still trusting someone else's observation of the world and putting your faith into that person's intelligence as being something you can trust, right? Because most of the science that we're told or taught in school to believe in is not, everyone doing the science or the experience for themselves and basing their trust or belief in it based off of their own observations, their own experience, their measurements. They're trusting what someone else did and experiences long, long ago is trustworthy, reliable, intelligent, logical, rational, whatever. But like I said, you're still putting your faith in someone else's understanding of the world, which, in my opinion, it still takes faith to do that. It's just like you can claim it's not faith, but to me, it still is, because you're trusting what someone else is telling you. And everyone is like, at some point, you have to put your faith in something. I mean, unless you believe you know all the answers and you can trust everything that you think about the world is what is the matter of fact. But I feel like what people don't understand about that thought process is that is pretty much making, oh, from a Christian perspective, people who do that, it's a prideful thing, but it's also like you make yourself your own God in a lot of ways. Anyways, that's all I'm gonna share. I need to go to bed. So you're